This is Wine Online 101, presented by Drinks, a 10-part series for wineries to tackle an entirely new approach to expanding their business online. I'm Brandon Amoroso, founder and president of Electriq, a customer experience e-com agency, and I'm joined today by Zach Brandenberg, CEO of our parent company, Drinks, as well as Kelly Martin, the Chief Compliance Officer of Drinks. And today we're going to be primarily covering the enterprise experience that Drinks has and how it's applicable to the wine industry. Thanks, Zach and Kelly, for coming on.
Yeah, of course, Brandon. Thanks for having us.
So let's start with you, Zach. Why do you think your experience with enterprise is relevant and important to wineries?
So I think the best answer to that is to share a bit more about the background of Drinks. And I think we just touched upon it in our last episode, but how we got to this place is really what informs our ability to help this industry be more successful. So Drinks, when it formed in 2013, was really the combination of advertising technology experience, e-commerce experience, and adult beverage experience all blended together. And in the early days of the company, we focused specifically on our direct-to-consumer operation. So we actually went out and we bought 2 D2C consumer marketplaces that were essentially marketing wine to consumers on behalf of one or more winery partners. Today, our flagship property, Wine Insiders, which was just named by Wine Enthusiast a top value retailer alongside Costco and Trader Joe's last year, is one of the largest consumer marketplaces for premium and super premium wine online. And to get to that point, we had to solve all of the fundamental challenges related to e-commerce and best practices around communicating to our customers and building customer relationships, as well as ensuring that we had top flight regulatory compliance so that we could become successful. And as part of that objective, we brought on Kelly Martin, who's joined us here, of course, as our Chief Compliance Officer. I want to say it's probably 5 years ago, Kelly. Is that correct?
That's going on 6.
It's going on 6, and it's been a great ride since then. And Kelly helped lead us not only through the woods completely when it comes to our own direct-to-consumer operation, but helped spearhead what became our enterprise unit, what we stylize today as Wine as a Service. And it's essentially a platform we provide to retailers, including some of the Fortune 20 brands and consumer marketplaces, to help them enable a ship-to-home program for wine. So with that, let me pass it over to Kelly to talk a bit more about sort of how we wove to where we are today and what that means for what we're going to be able to do moving forward to help continue to enable the adult beverage industry. And I know we're going to talk a lot about wineries here, but to really enable the adult beverage industry to reach consumers online in a direct one-to-one fashion.
Thanks, Zach. So how I'd like to start out is, when I came on board at Drinks, there wasn't a lot of technology around all of the regulatory and compliance needs that we needed to solve for. So we took our Wine Insiders property, and that's where we built out all the technology functions to be able to manage compliance for e-commerce sales of wine. From that, we then decided what Zach mentioned was the enterprise side, the enterprise side of our business, which then we decided to take that technology that we built and offer it to some of these retailers and as well as just online merchants so they could add wine as a category and they didn't have to worry about all the nuances of compliance and regulatory concerns. And then from there, now we're moving on to the next phase and we're tweaking that technology to actually have it applied to wineries specifically. So we've had all of these, we've taken our learnings to be able to now apply it to wineries as well.
And I feel like there's a lot of value there as well, even beyond just the compliance side of things. I mean, that's like table stakes, absolutely needs to happen in order for you to be compliant. But from a marketing standpoint, I think our experience with clients like Macy's and some of the other companies that we work with lends itself pretty nicely to how we're going to be able to help enable wineries in a more sophisticated manner with e-commerce tools and technology. Even little things like SMS marketing that we're doing for Macy's Wine is something that I really have seen maybe 2 wineries do SMS at most. And that's like a huge ROI driver for all of the more traditional direct-to-consumer brands that we work with in skincare and consumables and whatnot. But what are some other takeaways from enterprise launches that you think are applicable here, either Zach or Kelly?
So from my perspective, and this will be a common theme, I think, throughout a number of our talk tracks here, you got to start with the basics. And we have to start with the basics when it comes to enabling wineries, but we need to start with the basics. And we did start with the basics with our enterprise clients, and even before that, historically, with our own direct-to-consumer properties. For example, when we bought Wine Insiders in 2014, this is a company that was originally started in 1982. So it was one of the original pioneers of anything beverage alcohol direct-to-consumer. But direct-to-consumer in 1982 wasn't a website communicating directly to you. It was advertisements in the back of local newspapers in the Chicagoland area and communicating that way. When we bought that business, one of the opportunities we saw was to really drive it online in a successful fashion. And so where the point I'm trying to make here is that we need to start with a successful e-com operation, a method to communicate to customers where they can engage with your product or service in a fashion that is friction-free for them, or at least less full of friction, if you will, and enhances the convenience, not only in which they can communicate to you, but how they want to shop and they want to purchase products. To do that, that's sort of step one. Step two is to make sure you're doing it in a legal fashion. That's where all of our conversation and deep expertise in compliance and regulatory affairs is so critically important, because you could have the greatest website in the world and the best business ideas, but if you're going to run around breaking the law, you're not going to get very far. And this is a heavily regulated industry. It's one of the very unique things we spoke about in the last episode that makes beverage alcohol slow to be a recipient of technological advances and innovation, because in many cases, and we've seen this with our partners, they have to sit back and wait, not just for the rest of their business units to evolve online, but then to have their chance to get through internal regulatory hurdles and be okay with now bringing the alcohol side online. So we always talk about those two things. From there, you can then be successful with, let's incorporate new marketing techniques. And your example with SMS for Macy's Wine Shop is a great example of that. You can't get to that third step unless you solve for step one and step two.
Yeah, I mean, you really need to have that solid foundation that you can grow upon. And for the winery side of things, it definitely starts with compliance. And I feel like as a winery, there's opportunity here though, because I've heard time and time again, oh, like we don't do direct to consumer because it's the headache, or we're not willing to work through the regulatory framework that we need to in order to be able to do this. But for the wineries that have, they're already starting to reap the benefits, and they're able to create better and longer lasting consumer relationships because of the fact that they have that direct to consumer presence. So those that aren't ready or willing to jump in, it's going to be an interesting next 5 to 10 years for them, I think, as it gets easier and easier through some of the work that we're doing to enable wineries to sell direct to consumer. So I want to jump to navigating the sort of complexities that come with state and local regulations and compliance for wineries. And what are some things that wineries should be looking out for, Kelly, that are either just thinking about starting to get into direct to consumer and don't really know where to start? What's some advice or resources or tips that you would lend to them?
Well, the first thing that a winery needs to do is that they need to get licensed. They need to get the proper direct-to-consumer licenses to be able to ship to these various states. And of course, each state has its own application process and nuances, registering for sales tax, et cetera. So that would be step one. And then step two is selling online. There's a lot of nuances with state regulations, with volume limits, how much a consumer can receive of alcohol, how much wine a winery is allowed to ship into a state, as well as alcohol taxes. So being able to solve for those, and that's some of the technology that we've been working on to be able to, so the wineries don't have to worry about that they can use our technology, and we're managing all of that compliance for them so that they don't run afoul of any sort of regulations and have investigations into their business, because there has been more recently a lot of enforcement on some of these compliance rules on volume limits, et cetera. So that gives them peace of mind.
Yeah, so just to expand on that, those sorts of solves that Kelly was just articulating were solves that she helped Drinks put in the early days, nearly 6 years ago, which enabled us to really start putting our foot on the gas when it came to our Wine Insiders business unit. And then roughly 4 years ago, at the beginning of 2018, we launched our enterprise unit. And that came out of the tech that we were able to build to support not just the fundamental e-com systems. And by e-com systems, I don't just mean the front end and what you as a consumer engage with, but the merchandising systems, the optimization, the integration with warehouse management systems, the fulfillment processing, et cetera, as well as the reg tech component. And that is really what is enabling us to get to this next phase, which is we're taking all of the learnings, not just what we put in place to solve for all the various edge cases with different types of ship to home solutions for different types of partners, meaning different wineries, different types of retailers, different types of product coming from outside the United States, product produced in the United States, and which items are applicable to consumers in which states, but all of the experience of building and operating, growing our own D2C wine property, and then supporting the growth of all these different enterprise partners to help now leverage that success for new to online companies, new to online wineries, new to online wine merchants.
Would it be an accurate statement to say the complexities around shipping direct to consumer for these enterprise partners is actually greater than it is for more of a standard winery looking to ship direct to consumer?
I'll answer that one. So I think it depends on the partner. Absolutely, when you consider some of our, licensed retailers that already hold beverage alcohol licenses, because it can run afoul of things. A winery can't provide that type of shipping and service to those licensed entities because of tied house rules within the industry. So there, I think it's much more complicated. The other thing is with our enterprise partners, this is where we get more of our expertise as well, because we have a network of licensed partners that we work with. So managing all of that for this network of licensed partners is a lot to do when you're working with multiple. Where a winery, it's their license, they manage their own permits, et cetera. So I think that's where we've really been able to learn from the enterprise side of our business.
Got it. It's fascinating for me as I work my way through all these various nuances, as opposed to what I'm used to traditionally, which is let's just set up a Shopify store. It'll take 30 seconds and you can ship whatever the hell you want to anyone, anywhere, and it doesn't matter. But
yeah, it's not like putting almonds in toilet paper in a box.
But I can't even believe that there are at least 3 direct-to-consumer toilet paper companies. I just can't understand it at all. And if are either one of you subscribe to either of them?
No.
Good. I would have been judgmental. So I want to talk about the competitive landscape. Where do wineries fit in compared to your traditional big box retailers? Because there's still wineries who think that the only way to go is through retail channels. And I've tried to sort of elucidate that they play off of one another, and you can have both because they are really cohesive in a sense, and online can drive in-store and in-store can drive online. But where do you think wineries and their direct-to-consumer presence fit when you compare to your traditional big box retailers?
So to answer that, you got to have a bit of perspective on the landscape. And the landscape, let's say prior to advances in direct-to-consumer shipping legislation, which really came out of the Supreme Court decision in 2005 that opened the opportunity for states to finally permit wineries to ship in order to really permit their own wineries to ship out. Prior to that, really the flow of alcohol is through the three-tier system. Producers like Gallo, distributors like Southern Glazers, retailers like Total Wine or Costco. And so wineries as producers have fundamentally relied on this system to get their product into the hands of consumers. That's just the way it worked. Certain states had different rules. California's always been a little bit of the Wild West going back to the days of gold discovery and whatnot, but that's the way the system worked. And as wineries began to be able to trade more successfully with consumers, I think originating in tasting rooms and whatnot, sales on premise, if you will, the opportunity became more apparent to start engaging directly with your consumers. Start directly engaging with your customers. They're now your customers, and building that relationship and seeing that by going one-to-one or going direct to your consumers, you are no longer subject to the requirements, the boundaries, and the pricing parameters that would exist through a distributor model. And this is, it's complicated for beverage alcohol producers, but it's really fundamentally the same thing as you've seen in other industries, where the ability of manufacturers or businesses that stylize themselves like manufacturers, like Allbirds for shoes, or Warby Parker for eyeglasses, or Harry's for razors, were able to create a value proposition for the customer that, hey, if we don't go through the same system that existed, you're going to get the same great product, but you're going to get it at a better price. And even though they had this demand, the wineries had this demand, they wanted to reach consumers directly and create that one-to-one relationship, so they weren't beholden to whatever's going to happen through the traditional wholesale tier, and consumers wanted it. There's always been a fear that lingers in this industry about, what does that do? Does direct-to-consumer cannibalize my brick and mortar retail sales? This is not a unique concern to wineries, I would argue. I think that you've seen similar arguments and concerns articulated by some of the largest brands out there. Does a D2C business unit, is that going to interfere with the sales of Nike shoes, for example, in retailers like a Foot Locker or others? Does selling your product on Amazon, which is an extension here, it's not just D2C, but there's more at play there, but does selling your product at on Amazon, is that going to reflect poorly on you as a manufacturer or as the brand, instead of moving it through your traditional channels? So these questions about, we deem internally and sort of refer to holistically as channel conflict, are ones that come up, but there is really strong evidence that shows that your ability as a producer or wine merchant to build a relationship with your customer and create your brand is going to have a beneficial impact and create sort of a rising tide that lifts all the boats, because there's going to be greater awareness in the market. And you, again, as the winery, you're the one driving that greater awareness. Otherwise, you're beholden to somebody else, whether it's a retailer who's got a ton of other products that they're going to be merchandising and advertising, or a distributor who also is carrying a ton of other products, to be the ones that are advocating for you. With direct-to-consumer, you can be your own advocate. And we spoke about this last time. You can create advocates among your customer base who will then help drive further awareness and interest in your product.
And with that direct-to-consumer presence as well, you get way more data, like data that you can take to the retailers, but also data that you can utilize to actually even promote in-store sales. We've done it a lot with consumable brands that just get put into an Albertsons or a Whole Foods, and we have an email and SMS list that we can segment based off of their zip code, and we put like a radius around it, and then we drive them in store either through just some basic promotional messaging or even like a manufacturer's coupon code, so that there's a tie out to what sort of demand generation we're pushing from D2C into retail. And that helps a lot to then have the retailer say, oh, wow, like look at all the demand that's here. Let's move them out of the test phase of the 10 stores into 100. or let's take them across the entire West Coast. So you can really bolster and sort of force the hand, I feel like, of retailers if you can push your own demand and not be reliant on somebody looking at 500 wines on the shelf and somehow deciding that your label is the one that they want to choose that day.
If you as the product owner, you as the manufacturer, the retailer have data on your consumer behavior, it just puts you ahead, because you're going to be dealing with parties, whether it's again your wholesaler, which is a required component here in almost every state, or the retailer. You're going to have information that's going to help them, and anything you can do to help them is going to make them more successful. The conversations about data are ones that Kelly and I have all the time with our enterprise clients, because the power of data, which we should probably talk about in an upcoming episode, is your data itself is put on a pedestal as something that everybody wants and everybody knows they need it, but the utilization of it is not quite at the same level as the desire for it. And discussing not only why data is important, but how it can be leveraged to make your business more successful is a key component. But I'll say this only to be repetitive. You can't get to that component. You can't get to collecting consumer data and using it to make the shopping experience better until you solve for your first two steps. You got to have an e-commerce solution in place. You have to be able to reach consumers directly. You have to do so in a compliant fashion. Otherwise, you're just going to trip and fall time and time again.
Yeah, take those easy baby steps, set a foundation, and then from there you can grow. Like I've been in a couple of CRMs before, and it's almost scary how much data there is on a profile. But then you look at what they're doing from an email and SMS marketing perspective, and it is not like literally nothing, like just batch and blast campaigns, not taking into account any of the first and zero party data that you have on these customers. And for wine, I think because it's such a personal preference, there's so many applications that can be applied there. Like, are you red, white, or rosé drinker? What sort of like age do you typically drink on your wines? What sort of experience are you drinking? Is it with friends typically, or are you on the couch watching a movie drinking wine? There's so many different aspects that you can play around with to create more of a personalized customer experience, which excites me the most about wineries being able to start leveraging some of these tools and technologies. Because I just think about it as a consumer myself and how I would want to be treated in a relationship with a winery versus how it is now, which it feels like it's a little bit commoditized, except for some that are really digging into their story and what makes them unique.
That's right. I mean, it is interesting to look at the other side of the coin, what the consumer is looking for from each of these. The way we might talk about it is, what is the consumer looking for from each of these brands or these retailers? We have, traditional brick and mortar retailers on our platform where the consumer demand is fundamentally, I know what I can buy in a store. Now I want to buy it from my couch. I want you to ship it to me. That's the impediment today. It's easier to buy a Tesla online than it is to buy alcohol in many places. Then you have other partners, other clients of drinks whose customer base may already be shopping online and may be more familiar with the concept of buying alcohol online, but wants their store, wants their favorite brand to deliver to them a curated experience. And how do you get that curated experience? You can only get it if you understand what the consumer actually wants. And you know enough about what they've bought, what other products they've been buying, what they've been building in their basket, to take that information, glean insights from it, and then present to them whatever that product assortment. Maybe that product assortment is all vegan sustainable wines, for example. Or maybe it's complementary to whatever you can infer that they put in their bag. What you can infer is the event or entertaining purpose for the other items that they have in their shopping basket. And that ability to connect the dots between solving for whether a consumer has a base issue, like, can I get something or not, to now I know I can get it. So you can get it, all of a sudden your needs change. It's no longer just good enough to have that very binary problem solved of a 1 or a 0. Now it's, okay, well, now it has to be better. Now I know I can get it, but why is my shopping experience so poor? Why can't I get everything I want? Why can't you render suggestions to me in an optimized fashion so I don't have to sort through 13 different pages of product to figure out what it is that I actually need?
Yeah, that makes sense. Before we wrap up here, I just want to jump back to you, Kelly, for one final sort of parting question. What is possible and what does it look like for these brands that work with drinks when they don't have to worry about the compliance side of things? Like, what are some of the headaches, some of the things that are being alleviated as a byproduct of utilizing a solution like drinks?
Well, I mean, using our technology and managing the compliance form, that, I mean, they're able to then focus on that consumer experience that they're providing and focus on the marketing behind the program versus having to go out and get licenses or using even some of, like with the brick and mortar store, with some of our licensed retailers, the operational components of it, it just interferes with their current business model. So obviously using our technology, I think it's a quick turnkey way for our enterprise partners to be able to add a beverage alcohol category to their program and sell online.
Seems like a no-brainer for me. Well, thank you both for coming on. Just to give a quick recap to everybody that's listening, in this session, we really explored the enterprise experience and background of drinks and how that's more broadly applicable to wine, and what sort of things wineries should be looking out for when it comes to compliance, and how you can leverage the learnings that drinks has in the enterprise space to the winery space. For your initial homework, think about your competitive advantage and how you could bring that into the online space. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Just email us at wineries@drinks.com and we'll respond. And if you're available, we'll set up a meeting to go over what we could potentially do to help you tackle that list. And we might even have you come on to do a quick little mini episode to chat through some of the challenges that you've been having in this particular area. Again, thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time for episode 3.